Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome back to our Zoom Daily with Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz, to a realistic map of meaning, where we read his wonderful book, The Selfish God, and we started to show some videos that he posted at the end of the book in his addendum, with some conversations around Jordan Peterson's viewpoints. And anyways, I'll let the rabbi talk about it. So shalom, Rabbi Shlomo. So good to be with you once again. How are you doing tonight?
We're doing great. Good to be with you. And where else is out there, including Ronald here. And so I think we're up to rule number 8, Jordan Peterson's rule number 8. And you're in charge of playing it out, so let's give it a crack.
All right, let's hit share screen.
Let's see what we got.
Rule number 8, tell the truth or at least don't lie. This has been a sort of theme of everything we've been talking about.
You have to know the truth. And that's hard. But
the
you
volume.
can know when you're lying. Sometimes you don't know, because what the hell do you know? But sometimes you know. And you can feel that. That's a disjunction of meaning. So you'll know. You see this often with people who are very socially awkward, you know. They'll say something that's sort of grandiose and it really falls flat and everyone's a bit embarrassed, including them. It's like if they were paying attention, they would notice that disunited them.
You hear
and
it? I
made
can't
them
hear it
weak.
so good.
And then they wouldn't say it. And so that's the thing about not lying, is that lies make you weak and you can feel it. It's the antithesis of meaning, I would say, because meaning is associated with the truth. So if you're lying, you're at the opposite pole of that. That's the deceit part. And it makes you weak. You think, well, I'll lie and I'll get away with it. It's like, no, you won't. You cannot get away with warping the structure of being. Well, that's why the arrogance comes in. It's like, well, I can lie and get away with it. It's like, I see. Here's your theory. There's all this reality around you that you don't comprehend at all. And there's not that much of you. There's a lot of it. And you're going to do something that isn't in harmony with that, and it's going to work. That's your theory. It's like, go try it out, man.
That's some serious narcissism.
Yeah.
And yet,
Well,
and yet we all do that to some degree,
Yeah.
or at least at some point in our lives, right?
Yeah,
We all
well-
think we can manage everything.
Well, it's part
but you
because
can't.
you can get away with it for a short period of time, right? So you think, well, I've got away with it so far. It's like, yeah.
I'm not sure why Jordan Peterson titled this "Tell the Truth or at least Don't Lie." He could have just said "Tell the Truth," but it's a good thing that he did include the last half, because I have a fascinating Jewish teaching that says just the opposite. Sometimes you should lie. Here's the case. Remember Shammai? I mentioned him in the first lesson about smiling. Well, he was a great scholar who had a whole school, and they're called the House of Shammai. And he had a peer called Hillel, a colleague, who also had an academy, and that was called the House of Hillel. And these two houses had a different approach to life in many instances. And one famous instance is when you're attending a wedding and you're celebrating with the bride and groom, and the wedding's done, and you're complimenting them and saying what a wonderful couple they are, etc. So you to make the grooms often get cold feet, so they have to be made comfortable with the choice they've committed themselves to. So Beis Shammai said, look, compliment the bride to the groom that in whatever way you can, but tell the truth, like Jordan Peterson suggests. So, she has beautiful eyes, so mention the eyes, concentrate on the eyes. If she's, got a nice figure, or she has a pleasant personality, or beautiful hair, or she's wearing a gorgeous gown, whatever it is that you can find to say nice about her, say that to the groom to make him feel good. But the House of Hillel took an opposite approach. They said, no, lie through your teeth, they suggested. Say she's the most beautiful woman that ever inhabited the planet. She's gorgeous. She dresses so nicely. Her personality is just astounding. Whatever you can think of to say in the superlative, say it. As long as you can be convincing, even if that's not your opinion. You don't find her particularly attractive. You don't find her particularly pleasant. But say it anyways to make the other person feel good. So, and the reason they have is that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And there's no absolute truth here. And the groom's truth is that he married her. So he must have liked her. And your job is to confirm that notion to him. He is entitled to that opinion, and you are there to support that value judgment. And you have to be able to differentiate between judgments of value and judgments of fact. So when it comes to value judgments, that you can side with the other person, recognize that that's their value, and support them in it. Of course, truth, factual truth, that you can't lie about. You have to, as the Torah says, the Bible says, distance yourself, stay far away from a falsehood, and that's a factual thing. And that's an interesting segue to at least don't lie. Not true. Jewish teaching says lie, but only in certain circumstances that say things that are not your particular opinion, but they happen to be somebody else's, so you can support them in that. And Jordan Peterson talked about not weakening yourself through a lie. Yes, when you try to live with facts that are not true, that will ultimately undermine you and perhaps destroy you. But when you're giving support to value judgments, that strengthens you. That gives you power, because to be able to support another human being, that's a powerful thing. And so if you learn how to sincerely and amicably and in a supportive way make them feel good about what they're doing and what choices they've made, then that's an unbelievable power. And there you're entitled to trade your truth for their truth, and say it and not consider it a lie. Consider it their truth and support it. So tell the truth, and if it's their truth, tell that truth. That would be the Jewish teachings for rule number 8.
Wow, Rabbi Schwartz, I like how you brought out that judgments of value versus judgments of facts. That I found very useful, especially with what we were discussing before the class.
Uh-huh. As I'm watching it, though, you have to realize that I made this video before COVID-19, which is a nice time place card. And since then, there's been this, what is a woman? And this confusion about sexes and so on. So so I can well imagine somebody watching that and will say, okay, so then you're saying if somebody says they're a woman when actually they're a boy, you should agree with them and should support them and so on. And I wouldn't argue with that. I would say, yes, you should. But because if they have that opinion of themselves, but here's a dicey thing, is here you're going to wind up, there's a fact and there's a value, and they're colliding. The fact is they're not a woman, they're a boy, or, the other side. But so you have to, you can't lie about the fact, but you can appreciate the value. So I think that there's a middle ground that I didn't have to address when I made that video, but there's a middle ground that someone who feels that they are more female than male, and I think everybody has a little bit of both, and like most men are more male, most women are more female, but some are legitimately more the other.
I'm trying to watch my tongue. I mean, we had a comment yesterday. Somebody didn't like my making the statement on woke liberals, and
well, they are. They have to realize they're woke. But so I don't mind discussing that with someone. But here, the difference I want to make is that somebody that's convinced that they're the opposite gender, you could support them. You could say, I understand you want to.
Well, the facts are you can be confused as well.
Right, and if you want to behave that way, if you feel more, let's say, a female value or something, that's fine. But you have to at the same time recognize, I have to point out to you, the fact is that you have male genitalia, and other women will be uncomfortable. You wouldn't be. If you were a female, bodily, physically a woman, you would feel uncomfortable with a nude male, and so you should be able to appreciate that. And you have to consider other people. You can't just look at your needs. You have to consider other people too. So you got to find this fine line in between. So where someone is not fitting in.
Yeah, I find there's certain people that just want to blur the lines and distort the facts and paint their own picture and call that life.
I understand it, and So listen. I've had a video on criticizing, where you can't back down from criticizing somebody, but you always have to do it with discretion and humility, and try to help the person. And this, I would say, falls into that category, where you have to appreciate what they honestly feel, and console them or commiserate with them, but at the same time, can't give up the facts. You have to recognize that the other people look at it differently. So we have to find you a way to navigate through this, that helps you, but it's not going to help you to fight the whole world. Like he was saying, like Jordan Peterson was saying, you can't ignore reality. It's going to stab you in the back in the end. So that it becomes a much more, maybe a much more relevant issue than it was when I gave Dave that video, because you have to include a whole new mindset among some people. But I don't think that it doesn't fit. I think that it still applies. It just wanted to bring it out a little more. Okay.
Ronald, have you got any comments?
No, but I found it quite interesting on using two avenues, factual and
versus value. Yeah,
value. Yes, being able to interweave being valuable, so you're actually agreeing in a sense. And I hadn't looked at it that way before, but yes, because it is their choice, as you say, in the marriage that we're discussing. So that's a learning point for me to be able to use, because I try to be factual,
Rabbi,
but I
should
don't know
I play
how to
number
get around
9?
it.
Number 9 has got the title, "Assume the person you are listening to might know something you don't."
Right. Okay.
Good with that?
Yeah, let her rip.
Is assume that the person you are listening to might know something you don't. This is a chapter about conversation and about the different forms conversation takes. And it's a chapter about humility, and it's a chapter about listening. And the humility element is, it took me a long time to understand why there's religious injunctions supporting humility.
Okay.
And so what that means is that every time you encounter some evidence that you're ignorant, someone points it out, you should be happy about that, because you think, oh, you just told me how I'm wrong. It's like, great. Like maybe I had to sift through a lot of nonsense to get through the real message that you're telling me. But if you could actually tell me some way that I'm wrong, and then maybe give me a hint about how to not be wrong like that, well, then I wouldn't have to be wrong like that anymore. That would be a good thing. And many of those things are little tools that you can put in your toolkit, like Batman, and then you can go out into the world and use those tools, and you don't have to fall blindly into a pit quite as often. And so the humility element is, well, do you want to be right, or do you want to be learning? And it's deeper than that. It's, do you want to be the tyrannical king who's already got everything figured out, or do you want to be the continually transforming hero, or fool for that matter, who's getting better all the time? And that's actually a choice, it's a deep choice, and it's better to be the self-transforming fool who's humble enough to make friends with what he or she doesn't know, and to listen when people talk. And
well, Jordan Peterson ends this session with a brilliant phrase: make friends with what you don't know. It requires thinking about that. And fascinating concept of the ever-transforming fool. The Jewish people have a different name for that. In Ethics of Our Fathers, which I've mentioned back in Rule 1, Pirkei Avot, Chapter 4 opens with a statement by Rabbi Ben Zoma, who says, what's the definition of a wise man? Is someone who learns from every man, from everybody else. Means he listens. There's something to learn from everybody. So I'm not sure why Dr. Peterson insists on labeling it the ever-transforming fool. He might have been better off using the Jewish practice of calling it that, is a wise man. Listen. Now, in terms of listening, that's how he started this session. He said this is a discussion about humility and listening. And it's interesting. The humility that he's talking about is not the humility that he spoke about back in Rule 2, where he described how we feel so fragile about ourselves. We know we're fragile, and we know we're imperfect, and we know that we can do bad things and do bad things, and so we feel negatively about ourselves. That humility drags you down. The humility that he's talking about is one that propels you forward, is that recognizing that you don't know everything, but you can learn more. Listen, and you'll learn things that you didn't know before. You'll make friends with what you don't know, be familiar with it. But he doesn't give us any practical advice on how to do that. And it's a problem. Jewish people have a practice, and I'll describe the practice through a joke. Somebody asked a Jewish person once, "Why do you guys always ask so many questions?" And the guy responded, "Why not?" He responded with a question. Because we have ingrained a habit, the Jewish people, of asking questions. And I think the reason for it is because by asking questions, you pursue knowledge. And the advice is, don't be shy to ask questions. Don't be afraid of revealing that there's something you don't know. There's no reason to feel embarrassed about it. That feeling of embarrassment is something that just put it out of your mind. Ask the question, learn something new, and that will propel you forward. It's an act of humility, but you'll really be becoming a wise man by recognizing that you can learn something from every person you speak to. There's another Jewish practice that will help in this sense of learning the proper form of humility and learning from other people. And you might think it's universal, and it is. God wanted us to learn from each other and to be humble enough to recognize that we don't know it. So you're organized that we'll get into a situation that requires that, and that's called marriage. Men and women think differently. That's obvious to many people, but now scientists have discovered or proven that actually the brains are wired differently and they look at the world differently. There's different needs. Men and women have different needs and different drives, and that contributes to it. But on top of that, their brains are wired differently, and that winds up giving a different view of the world. And so getting married is you have to work it out with the person of the opposite sex, come to some kind of compromise or agreement on how to approach things. Now, everybody gets married, it's a universal practice, but I fear that too many times people are doing so out of the Rule 2 type humility. In other words, they're recognizing they're fragile, they can't do it their own, they need something. Men need, mostly, it's a generalization, but generally it's true, men get married for sexual intimacy, women get married more for security, and those are different needs. And they recognize they can't do it on their own, so that's the fragility and I can't do it, and then I have to have somebody support me. It's the negative aspect of the humility. But there's another approach to it. The Jewish people consider it a mitzvah, a Torah instruction to get married. In other words, we're recognizing that God wanted us to get married. In fact, why did God want us to get married? It's back in Genesis 2:24, after Adam realizes that it's the flesh of my flesh and the bone of my bones. God says, therefore, a man should leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and they become one flesh. Now, it doesn't mean when you leave your father and mother, you should abandon them. And it also can't mean that become private. You don't have to tell me to be private with my wife. What it means is that every family develops their own approach, their kit of likes and dislikes, and the children grow up in that. They contribute to it and they grow up in it. But then when you become adult and you're going out and getting a spouse, then you're instructed, leave that style that you become used to and cleave to your spouse, develop a new style. And that's what's going to happen, because you have to adjust to each other. And that's a learning process. And that's a humbling experience. And you learn to listen. And if you do it with the attitude that it's not that I can't supply myself with what I need, but that I'm performing I'm following God's instruction. There's something positive to be gained here. I'm going to learn. I'm going to produce. Well, you're going to produce a family. That's also a big instruction. But aside from that, aside from the kids, there's also just the idea of becoming one flesh, of setting up a new household, a new way of looking at the world. That's also an accomplishment. And when you look at it this way, as a positive step of adjusting, that's difficult. It's difficult many times. There's arguments, but that's a positive accomplishment to seek that compromise, to seek that adjustment, to seek that reconciliation. You'll become not only the ever transforming fool, you become a very wise person.
Rather interesting for sure, Rabbi.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a marriage has that's why it was that's why it was introduced, and I spoke about it early on how marriage in the Torah was not necessarily for children. That comes with time, and there'll be different people, but as the child is born, that itself creates different relationships with everybody, with your spouse, with your parents, with your.
Oh yeah, the dynamic changes
right.
for sure.
Yeah, so it's all relationship building, and that's what it's all about. And my book takes that into it much deeper on how by building those relationships, you're actually building or adding to the building of the universe, because the whole universe is composed of relationships between objects. Everything interacts with each other, and that's how come you know they're there. And so you're adding unique relationships that didn't exist before, so they're your creation, and it's just it cascades from there. It's a phenomenal thing. So it's all tied together.
For sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
So I think we have time for one more.
Oh yeah, for sure. Okay, I'm going to play number 10.
I mean, this is very clearly what you do. I like this one, and I mean, this is very clearly what you do. Be precise in your speech.
So God makes the world by speaking. Okay, so that's the first thing to think about. You're supposed to think like in a sophisticated way about this. The idea is that there's some integral relationship between communication and the structure of being. It's part of the role that consciousness plays in the world, whatever that role is. Language takes the chaos and makes it into things. And so God has Adam name all the animals. They're not even really real until they have names. Now, they're more implicit. That's another, here's an example. Let's say that you're having a rough patch in your relationship and you don't know why. It's unnameable. Is it real? Well, yeah, it's manifesting itself in like a physiological discomfort. Then you talk about it and you name it. It's like, it goes from this blurry thing that's kind of potential, it goes snap, and then it's this thing, right? And then that's a horrible thing. It's like a little poisonous thing, but it's not a whole foggy cloud of potential poison. It's like this little sharp poison thing. And then you think, okay, it's real. It's a little monster, but it's not, it's little at least, and now probably we can do something about it if we can admit to it. So it's this precision that specifies. And so it's almost always better, it might be better without exception, to name the thing, no matter how terrible it is. And if you can't name it, what that means is that you're telling yourself that you're so terrified that you can't bring your attention to bear on it. And that makes you're the loser.
Well, I have to disagree with Jordan Peterson, this last comment that you're the loser, when you fail to be precise in finding out precisely what it is that's bothering you, because there's another approach. I do agree for the value of being precise in your speech and trying to nail it on the head and discussing with people and going back and forth. And I mean, that's what intelligent discourse is all about. But the thing that he describes where there's something manifesting itself in physiological discomfort, that's on a personal level. And there's another approach instead of being precise, because that can take years to identify exactly what's bothering you and exactly how to deal with it. That can take years, and in any situation. A long time, anyways. It's a big effort. So if you can do it, fine. But most of the time, it's not so easily done. And so the other approach is to just adjust, to leave it alone, live with it. It's not a big deal. You don't have to be discomforted by someone else's habits or attitudes or something. Just adjust. There's a famous Jewish teaching between the houses of Shammai and Hill. I've mentioned them before. And he had a number of disagreements, how to deal with this situation or that situation. So take, for example, in the area of kosher, which is things that are permitted to eat and things that are not permitted to eat, which we have a lot of rules governing. So they had major disagreements, which meant that one school would permit certain activities and the food's good, but the other school felt that those activities were prohibited and would not eat the food, but not only the food, but also the utensils in which the food was prepared, because they now became not kosher. Not only the food itself, but also the utensils. And teaching that records their relationship says that they used to lend each other utensils. May not be a habit today, but those days, you need a big pot or something like that. Maybe it happens today still, but there was much more borrowing and lending going on of this kind. So they said they lent each other. So how can you lend it? According to you, it's prohibited. So what are you borrowing it for? And the answer given is no, because each school, realizing that the other camp disagreed with them and felt that what this food was prohibited, so they would keep track of which of their utensils had been used for what the other camp would consider prohibited food, and therefore when they came to borrow utensils would say, yes, I have a utensil I can lend you, and it hasn't been used for what you think is prohibited. They would keep track, even though, as far as they were concerned, that the utensil was fine. But because they had such care and concern for the other party, that they would keep track of their utensils that were no good according to the other party, and so that you can rely on me when I give you a utensil, it's good even according to you. That's a tremendous level of cooperation and care and concern for the other party, even though you violently disagree with them. As far as you're concerned, they're completely off base. But you respect their right to their opinion, and you respect their right to their own judgment and to follow it, and you want to still be friendly with them, so you keep track of these disputes. You live with it. You adjust. You don't have to defeat the other guy. And things that give you discomfort that Jordan Peterson describes, maybe the better approach, the better solution is to just put it out of mind, learn to adjust. It's not a big deal. You can live with it. But as far as being precise in your speech, that is something you want to practice by engaging, don't be afraid to engage in discussions surrounding that issue as to why do you feel that it's no good, and here's why I feel it is good, and understanding the rules, see if you can convince the other party with respect. There's a lot that'll be gained from that.
Well, Rabbi, I think what Jordan Peterson was talking about, I mean, I've worked with plenty of psychiatric people and had to do security and all kinds of stuff. The point being is that they live in a unique world, a lot of them, and often the fears that they have are this overwhelming, overarching, encroaching something bigger than they can cope with. By narrowing it down to exactly what's the root of the fear or the nugget allows them to overcome it. I mean, we live in crazy times, and a lot of people have such different outlooks of the world that we all walk around in, and ideas start to clash. And I think you're right not to be in the confrontational arena. I like how you explained at the end there about the different schools, a thought on issues, and I don't think a lot of non-Jewish folks understand how clear halakha is versus agadah, or tradition, and because the Jews have been, so spread around the whole planet. I mean, you've had pockets develop their own unique ways of doing things, but, they still try to hang on to the core root of what is
My major goal there. I know you're right. You're right about all that. My major goal was to introduce the possibility of forgive or forget. It's not bandied about as much as it should be. It's not offered as an option as often as it should be. You can forget about it. You can just, it's not a thing. Leave it alone.
Yeah, don't make a mountain out of a molehill, for sure.
And people today, no, this is the way it's got to be. It's not. It's not really the way it's got to be. You can live with confidence that you're right, and let the other party live with confidence they're right. And you don't have to go to war with them. You can look for to understand their point of view, but in a certain area, you can just leave it be. And I don't think that that's offered as an option as often as it should be. That was my main goal in that video.
Very good point. Yeah,
and the other part is, of course, you can be specific and so on. And look, like you say, some people that are very psychiatrists are very troubled there, but that's a long process. That's not, if that's the case, unfortunately, they will have to spend the time and look for the precise,
battling their own demons. Yeah,
but you're looking at a long process. You're as is well known, that takes a long time.
It's a marathon, not a sprint. Yeah.
And I suspect that many times some of these issues that people allow themselves to be bothered by,
right,
because they're going to somebody that's making a living from them. Look, there's a little bit of bias there, and they're not supposed to be, but I don't think anybody can help it. It's rare for them to try and convince them to let this go, forget it, stop bothering you, you can live with it. And so it just exacerbates. So I'm reminded of, like, say, if a couple goes to divorce and the lawyers get in at it, and they insist, no, you got to have.
And the lawyers will sweet talk it down. Carve it up like a Christmas turkey.
Yeah, so it's terrible but they're just doing their job. But their job is, unfortunately, to win on their side and not compromise, and that's very, very unfortunate.
Ronald, have you got anything you want to say? I mean, we're winding her down for today.
No, but just the forgiving and the forgetting. A lot of people can't forget, and they let it play on their own mind for too long. And quite often it's on
and it stews, right?
You need people. You need your friends to tell you to forget it. I've been in that situation. I know that. I know what it's like. Something will bother me, but my friends said, let it go. And so finally I listened, and it went. It'll go if you let it go. So it's you need help. That's the help. That's fast. That can happen fast. Somebody's telling you, a good friend of yours telling, let it go, let it go, let it go. You can let it go a lot faster. And
often I have known certain people with certain types of traumatic brain injury that things just don't resolve. It just keeps repeating like a broken record.
There's a physical factor, so then you need professional help. So that's totally different. Professionals are trained to deal with the specific instance, not the generalities. I'm looking at the generalities. Okay, so that's it for tonight. Right. Got 2 more videos to go, and we've got the list of mitzvahs. They're ready to go and read, and a little discussion there, and we'll be done. I don't know if we'll finish before Pesach, but we don't have a Thursday night class this week. But we should. We'll finish the videos and we'll get.
Well, we still got tomorrow night and Wednesday, so right. Let's play it by ear, and we'll make progress. We got a couple more to cover tomorrow, and then maybe we can start on the mitzvahs if you got the time. All right, folks, we're going to sign out for Zoom Daily for today, and we'll see you tomorrow, same time. Bye for now.
Thank you very much. Anybody heard from Rabbi?